You ever wonder if you're living in a dystopian world where, well, things just couldn't get any worse? Well, apparently, in Mike Pondsmith's world, we've exceeded that dystopia in an incredible way. That's right. We're here to talk about Cyberpunk, and this is a video you probably weren't expecting. So let's talk about it on That Game Place. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Game Place. And today we have a special story, as I kind of introduced a moment ago, but we have a very special guest, somebody who understands the world we're about to talk about and also has played the game. And to tell the truth, I really enjoyed the game, and I think you did too, right, Comics?
Yeah, not just the video game, but also the tabletop version is how I started. That was my introduction to this world. But yes, I played the game, played the DLC, love it. It's a fantastic game now that they worked out all the issues.
Yeah, once they figured out the police and then they changed the mechanics around it all, which I'm still getting used to, by the way, on my fifth or sixth playthrough of the game. I'm going to tell you right now that they've fixed everything, it is a lot of fun to play, and it really brings you into this world. But there's a small problem, Comics. I bet you didn't know this.
Oh, really? What's that?
The problem is that from everybody, everywhere in the gaming space, including over at Kotaku, which is where this first article is from, it wasn't the worst of America. It wasn't dystopian enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, the funny part is that when they talk about the worst of America, or at least when it comes to the dystopian future, it has nothing to do with America per se, because this dystopian future is pretty much worldwide. So
yeah,
it's not just an American issue.
Which is a subtlety that it won't be missed on you and I, who understand the tabletop game and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of these people didn't quite understand it. Maybe the developer of the game didn't quite get it. Maybe not enough conversations with Mike Pondsmith. But look, it wasn't the only outlet that did this story, because as this news broke on Friday, and it's early in the week, the following week, we have this from Bounding Into Comics, where they wrote their own version of the story, saying that it didn't push the envelope far enough with its social commentary. And there's a reason for this. And Spencer did a great job in his article. I would encourage you to read it. But I would start here, Comics, with CD Projekt Red executive admits Cyberpunk 2077 was not dystopian enough after multiple visits to California cities.
Well, if by the worst of America they mean California, I mean that's a really good example of what the dystopian future may look like, especially with human feces on the street. So,
well, yes, but I mean, and we're going to get into this article, and I hope you guys will bear with us. But when your dystopian video game doesn't measure up to the world around you, you've got a problem. Right, you've got a problem. So, very quickly, let's bounce into this. We've got CD Projekt Red associate game director Paweł Sasko recently revealed that the company's first foray into the world of Cyberpunk 2077 was not dystopian enough after he visited multiple California cities. It looks like it's amazing to me. By the way, the game looks amazing. This actually is a real screenshot from the game. This is real. These are moments that you will have in this game. So it's cool. And it does look like, maybe California's run down a bit, although the palm trees look like they're all right. But during a recent appearance on CD Projekt Red's Answer Red podcast, Sasko and a number of other CD Projekt Red executives were discussing the company's expansion to Boston as they work on the follow-up to Cyberpunk 2077, codenamed Orion. So Sasko announced in 2022 that he and a number of developers for his project were moving to Boston. He posted, "I'm moving to Boston together with the core team responsible for Cyberpunk 2077 to establish new studio and be the foundation for the North American team," which looks cool, right? And here's the tweet that came out back then. I think you and I may have talked about this all the way back then, because I know you and I were, knee deep in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we move forward here, here's some of the art that goes with. By the way, the art in the game is amazing for all the gangs and everything. They do such a great job of course, the gangs are all corporate gangs, but
well, they have corporate sponsorship. I mean, the gangs is something that they lightly touch on in the game. They kind of hit the major booster gangs. But they really don't go into any more detail because there's a large amount of different factions of gangs within Cyberpunk. Booster gangs being one of them, poser gangs being another.
Yeah, and what's so strange, first of all, there is some language and nudity in this game, so be warned
Mhm.
for those of you with younger ones. But heck, they had to get immersed in American culture, and then Sasko stated this, and this is where I'm so glad you're here, comics. Being from Europe is like interesting. I sometimes feel like I'm in a camera and some other reality, just observing and taking snapshots. He then recalled, like, I remember traveling for us traveling a couple of times to, like San Francisco, LA, when working on Cyberpunk. And then after we sort of did the game, we shipped it. And I did even more traveling now when I'm in the US. I see that we didn't push the envelope far enough in some places.
Well, I mean, the fun thing about it is that, I mean, California's always been on the decline, but it's gotten worse since 2020, like way worse. So, I mean, they've been working on this game, I want to say for like a good 7 to 10 years, I think. I don't remember when they did the announcement trailer for it, but they've been
Yeah.
doing it for a while. And California wasn't like bad then.
Yeah, it is now.
It's
It
much worse now.
it is now, and what's funny is you said that California's always been on decline. The early California in the 50s and into the 60s, that was the golden era. People had fallen in love with the automobile,
Mhm.
and in fact, the California's a testament to the automobile with all the highways and freeways and interchanges and everything else. I mean,
Oh,
it
I
can't.
say it would be more on
Yeah,
the decline since like the 2000s more so than
yeah,
anything else.
yeah. I think you're right, and
After the Governor.
Actually, that's right. So as an example, he pointed to the homeless crisis in California, for instance. Let's say the homelessness crisis, and so on. Like when I look at it, I'm like, we weren't far enough in 77. We thought that we were like dystopian, but we just touched the surface. Just touched the surface. It's rough there. I mean, it's rough.
I would say Cyberpunk is much worse in comparison. I mean, it's bad
Yeah,
now in California, but the world of Mike Pondsmith created is far worse.
oh yeah, and I think maybe they realize that now. It's like, wow, we made it to the real world, and Mike was worse than this. So
Yeah.
look, you're like on the Orion project. He then added, or actually, I guess this is a different producer, Dan Hernberg. But you're like, we had one homeless person in a tent somewhere. Yeah, and Americans like, wow, that's like nothing. Like you need a whole city. Yeah, yeah, if you talk to Americans who've been to any of these specific cities and
Mhm.
that are following specific ideologies, um, you're going to find these massive homeless problems, the problems that you described early on with, human waste everywhere and things like that, right? So,
Well, that and people getting not gonna say kicked out of their homes, but Portland is pretty bad too.
yeah,
And a lot of that is because of Californians moving to Portland, renting, buying houses, kicking the locals out, jacking up the prices, and suddenly,
gentrification.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, kind of, I guess.
Mm.
But it's really a hostile takeover of the area. And suddenly you have these large swaths of people that have been displaced and can't afford to rent a place or buy a place. So they end up homeless, which is insane.
It's nuts, right?
Yeah.
So it is very different in some of these areas where even when I played Cyberpunk, that you kind of see these things like that. And you're like, wait, someone's like, oh, that's really bad. And you're like, no, that's barely scratching the surface of the differences. These
Mhm.
are subtle differences. So yeah. Whew. Anyway, Sasko then replied to that statement, I guess, with exactly. We thought, oh yeah, we are being edgy, with all that stuff. And I'm like, walk to the train every day is more edgy sometimes. My goodness. My goodness. And in Boston, I mean, it's rough. I mean, I've had people tell me that it's a little rougher in Boston than it's been in a long time. But if you go out to any of these West Coast cities, it's crazy.
Mhm.
So, and CNN noted in 2023 that California has spent a stunning 17.5 billion trying to combat homelessness um, over just 4 years. But in the same time frame, from 2018 to 2022, the state's homeless population actually grew.
Mhm.
Half of all Americans living outside on the streets live in California. That's not good. That
Well,
you don't want to.
it's a very expensive place to live. First off, it's like, we're going back to the whole Portland thing. When your cost of living is so expensive,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see that homelessness rise.
Yeah. And the outlet then claimed that more than 170,000 unhoused people live in California alone.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's remarkable. So, you know, I mean, that's the summation of the article. They obviously went on to say many other things. You can certainly go and find that, not just the story, which I would encourage you to read the That Park Place version, and then look at the Bounding into Comics one, and then ignore Kotaku completely. But
They're just fun to make fun of.
they're fun to make fun of. But
Yeah.
in their take on it was like, you know, very expected. But when you think about it, to have a video game as rough, rough a world being portrayed in a way that wasn't hard enough or edgy enough, that's quite surprising, even, you know, from directly from the developers' mouths, right?
Well, I mean, the funny thing about it is that there's nothing edgy about dystopian future. I mean, it's just dystopian. I mean, edgy is being edgy, right? I mean, what they're trying to do is, you know, portray a world where literally everybody is oppressed, right? And that's like one of the big things that Mike Pondsmith point out in his game. It's the reason why race isn't an issue in the game, is because literally everybody in the game is oppressed in some form or fashion. It's not a good world to live in, which is the whole point.
Yeah, and it's, again, folks, this is a corporate dystopian future where the corps run everything, including your life, and the kings and the queens are the CEOs of these corporations, which really become the royal families of the globe.
Yeah, and they basically control the governments too.
Yeah, they do. You know, they have their own arms, you know, companies, and they're their own arms dealers, and they're responsible for making sure their weaponry available to everybody.
Mhm.
But with all that being said, comics, is there any one way that you would sum this up outside of surprise?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, at this point, we live in a silly world. Why can't we just make fun video games and just go and adapt Mike Pondsmith's material, because it's great. You know, I've said this when the game released, even though it was in a pretty poor state. I never thought in my entire life I would see Mike Pondsmith's work on screen, be it, you know, video game or an anime series on Netflix. So for me, I was pretty stoked when it happened.
And I was too. I know you and I talked about it before the game came out. We were both very excited. I know we were less excited when the game came out because it needed some work. But I can safely say that I enjoyed every moment of playing it post the first few weeks. So on that note, folks, so I would encourage you. I think, comics, would you encourage people to play the game if they can?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's now that they've worked out all the issues, they've reworked a lot of the mechanics. It's a fantastic game to play. So yeah, I mean, I highly recommend. Excuse me, I highly recommend it. There we go. I can say words.
Well, I want to say thank you to you for joining us today, and I'm going to ask a question to our folks out there in the audience. Are you a person that's familiar with Cyberpunk and its world created by Mike Pondsmith? Are you familiar with the game itself? Have you played Cyberpunk 2077? And if not, did we talk you into it? Also, are you surprised that the developers thought that maybe they didn't go hard enough in the paint? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, tune in for the next one, folks, on That Game Place.